Got 100 steps to go. Tonight I'll make it 99. By rayrae118. Chapter 22. When the train pulled into King's Cross in London, Harry led his friends onto the platform. It was easy enough to find Molly waiting for them near the exit. Joella Zabini was there, along with Cyrus, Augusta, and Hermione's parents. Molly fussed over all of them, shedding tears over her grown-up babies. She couldn't believe they had graduated already. After several minutes, she turned to the whole group and beamed. "We're all going back to McGonagall Castle tonight. We'll have a nice party to celebrate. How does that sound?" Everyone nodded their agreement, and they quickly headed towards the Floo section of King's Cross. Harry knew that Sirius and Remus were both caught up at Hogwarts still, finishing up some grading and getting things ready for the break, which was why they hadn't come to collect him. Likewise, the other adults in their group were still at work, and would come and meet them later in the evening. "So, how does it feel to be a graduate?" Ginny mentally asked, as they lined up to step through the Floo. Harry glanced at her side along.
"Honestly, it hasn't really sunk in yet."
Ginny smiled. "Just give it some time. I'm glad you're going to be at school next year, though. I wouldn't want to go a whole year without you." Harry nodded slightly, so as not to draw attention from the rest of the group.
"That's the idea. I'm not sure about the job, really, but it seems simple enough. I'm a good flyer, and I've had a lot of practice with teaching, so it should be no problem. Aunt Minerva said that Madam Hooch can stay on part-time for the first couple of months if needed, to referee the first Quidditch game. I'm going to study and sit the test, hopefully before term ends, since I can't referee without having that certification."
Ginny nodded slightly, as Harry gave her hand a squeeze before stepping into the fireplace, followed quickly by his wife, and then Molly, who was the last to go through. The party began as soon as they arrived, with good food and laughter. Minerva, Remus, and Sirius arrived shortly after the group, from the station, and Amelia, Kingsley, Arthur, Frank, Alice, and Tonks came a bit later from the Ministry. Bill, Fleur, Fred, and George arrived from Diagon Alley around the same time. Charlie had returned to Romania just a few weeks after term had begun, but they would send him an invitation to Harry and Ginny's wedding so he could meet them in Greece. The evening passed pleasantly, with the large group sharing stories of their own experiences at school and how they felt after graduating. They spoke of Harry and Ginny's upcoming wedding, set for August 29th. The group would arrive at Sirius's Island 3 days beforehand, and most of them would depart on the morning of the 30th. Harry and Ginny would stay on the island for a mini honeymoon, and would be back in London on the morning of the 1st, so that Ginny could take the train to school. Harry would head to Hogwarts separately, as he would be a teacher now, not a student. Towards the end of the evening, the adults congregated in the dining room, while the teenagers mitigated outside, enjoying the crisp and clear night. They sat on the patio, drinking butterbeer and talking about their future plans. Daphne had apparently received quite the recommendation from Snape, and had gotten a tentative apprenticeship with a renowned potions mistress, pending notification of her NEWT scores, presuming her grades were satisfactory. She would begin immediately after the wedding. Blaise, similarly, had an interview for an apprenticeship lined up at St. Mungo's next week. If that went well, and if his NEWT scores were acceptable, he would likely start after the wedding as well. Ron would be meeting with the captain, coach, and owner and manager of the Appleby Arrows later in the week, and would begin training in October when the team returned from their break. The Quidditch season ended in August with the Quidditch World Cup. After that, teams would go on a vacation for several months, before they returned to begin training for the next season. Hermione bit her lip as they looked at her in silent question. She shrugged lightly. "I'm speaking with several arithmancy masters right now. I haven't decided anything, but I want to continue studying." They all chuckled a little. Of course, Hermione wouldn't be satisfied just graduating Hogwarts. She would want to keep going. Susan leaned forward eagerly. "Once we receive our NEWT scores, I'm going to apply to the Auror Academy. The new class starts in a month." She grinned. Aunt Amelia said they're condensing the training period into 1 year instead of 3 for the foreseeable future. They lost quite a few Aurors in the war, and need to rebuild.
That's great, Susan, Harry smirked. But are you sure you'll be accepted? You might not make it.
Susan growled and tossed a napkin at him. Prat! Harry laughed and Susan smiled, knowing he was just joking. A moment later, Harry got serious again.
I might head that way in a couple of years, he informed them. I think I still want to work for the DMLE at some point. I just want some distance and perspective first. Working at Hogwarts will give me a chance to unwind a bit, and stay close to Ginny.
He smiled at his wife, who grinned back.
After that, I'm thinking I might do a little travel, get some hands-on experience.
Don't you think you've had enough hands-on experience to last a lifetime? Neville asked curiously.
Harry shrugged. I meant in something other than fighting. I sent a letter to Sharptooth a couple of weeks ago, asking about the work they do abroad, and whether or not I could apply for a temporary position with them.
He bit his lip.
Bill and Fleur have asked for a reassignment in the next year or so, and Sharptooth indicated they would be heading to Egypt, and that I could join them if I want.
They were all a little surprised, except for Ginny, who knew Harry's tentative plans, and though she wouldn't like it if he left for a few months, or as much of it as a year, she accepted it. Harry needed to do things for himself, just like she needed to have her own life. She was considering going with him, at least for a few months. If she did end up getting an offer from the Harpies, like Gwen Oakhouse suggested she might, she would need to go back in time to start training in October, so that would give her the summer to travel with Harry. If he wanted to stay longer, she would just leave without him. Neville cleared his throat. I'm going to start studying for a herbology mastery next month. I already have an apprenticeship lined up. Professor Sprout gave me an excellent recommendation. My soon-to-be master said he didn't even need to wait for my NEWT scores. He offered me the apprenticeship just after the first meeting. Apparently Professor Sprout's recommendation was enough for him, and he didn't even need to see my scores. He accepted their congratulations with humility, and the topic of conversation moved back to Harry and Ginny's wedding. It would be a very small ceremony, with only a few others beyond those at the castle that evening being invited. Harry was quick to ask Ron to be his best man, which had the redhead beaming in excitement. Ginny asked Hermione to be her maid of honour, and the older girl was ecstatic to accept. Other than the teenagers, the guest list included Minerva, Sirius and Amelia, Molly and Arthur, Charlie, Fred, George, Bill and Fleur, Remus and Tonks, Ted and Andromeda, Kingsley, Augusta, Frank and Alice, Cyrus, Astoria and Snape, and Narcissa, much to their surprise. As for the rest of the wedding party, Harry asked Neville, Blaise and Bill to be his groomsmen. They would be walking down the aisle with Susan, Luna and Daphne, Ginny's bridesmaids. The only note of sorrow was the fact that Percy wouldn't be there to enjoy the day with them. Ginny knew it was painful for her mum and dad, and she also felt a hole in her heart at the thought of the older brother she had never really had much in common with, but had loved all the same. She would enjoy spending the day with her family and friends, celebrating the love that she and Harry shared, but she knew that Percy's absence would hit them hard. When the group dispersed for the night, everyone felt calm and relaxed, as they had never felt at the end of a school year before. Ever since Harry's first year, in fact, something had always happened, and the school year ended on a down note. But not now. The past was the past, and the future was uncertain. But one thing was for sure. They all had the chance to let their future develop. No more Dark Lord trying to hunt them down. No more Death Eaters cursing them at every turn. They all had lives to live, mistakes to make, and dreams to fulfill. Whatever else happened, they at least had that. The next morning, Molly dragged Ginny away from her goal of spending the extra day helping Harry clean and prepare Potter Manor for inhabiting, and instead wrangled her into a lengthy dress fitting. Apparently, while Ginny had been completing her 6th year, her mother had been working on a wedding dress. Ginny knew this was something her mother wanted to do, and after trying it on, She knew she would love it. Molly sniffed tearfully when Ginny complimented the dress. I'm actually altering an older one, she informed her daughter. Sirius gave me the wedding dress Lily wore when she married James. I made a few changes, but the overall shape is the same, and much of the fabric is original. I thought you and Harry would both appreciate the history. Ginny looked down at the dress her mother was altering. It was a beautiful, modified ball gown style. It had off-the-shoulder lace long sleeves at one point, but Molly had changed them to be a shorter cap sleeve. The neckline made a deep V that showed more cleavage than Ginny thought her mother would approve of, but Molly assured her that it accented Ginny's figure perfectly. The rest of the dress was a simple satin that hugged her down to the waist. The skirt was not quite a full ball gown, but was fuller than the typical A-line. The lace from the sleeves carried through around the back and provided a sheer cover to what would otherwise be a backless dress. The satin fabric started at her lower back. It was sexy, yet elegant. Ginny was very surprised that her mother had chosen this design, but Molly was not unaware of her daughter's figure. The dress was going to look fabulous on her. By mid-afternoon, Molly had made the adjustments she needed and let Ginny go with a hidden sigh. She knew that Ginny wanted to spend time with Harry, but she only had a short amount of time left with her daughter. Even if they were already married, Ginny was still underage for another few days, and Molly could pretend that she still had some say over her daughter. Ginny stopped before she stepped through the flue, sensing her mother's sadness. She hurried back and gave Molly a tight hug. I love you, Mum, she whispered. Molly's breath hitched as she hugged back just as securely. It doesn't matter how grown up you get. You'll always be my baby, she murmured. Ginny pulled back, sniffing slightly, and smiled. I know, Mum. I'll always be your daughter, no matter what. Molly nodded, tearing up as she observed the beautiful young woman her daughter had grown into. Percy would have loved to be here for this, she commented with a sniff. Ginny looked down at her shoes. I wish he could be here, she commiserated. I miss him. I mean, we never had much in common, but he was my brother, and a good man. I wish we hadn't lost so much time with him. Molly felt a few tears leak out. I know, dear. We all have our regrets. I wish I could go back and tell him every day how much I love him. But he'll always be with us, and I am so grateful he came back to us. Ginny nodded and gave her mother another hug, before Molly gestured for her daughter to go find her husband. Ginny wiped her eyes quickly and hurried through the flue. Time passed by quickly over the next week. Ginny went out for a day in Muggle London with Molly, Hermione, Susan, Luna and Daphne to hunt for dresses for the girls to wear. They would need to find them that day, but they didn't have to worry about getting the right sizes in time, or even the right colours, since they could fit all that with magic. The day was quite enjoyable for the group, as they visited several stores before finding what they were looking for. They had lunch out at an upscale cafe near the shops, before heading back out to hunt for dresses and accessories. Molly had wanted to go to Madame Malkin's to custom order dresses, but they wouldn't be ready in time. So Harry had suggested the day trip to Muggle London instead. He had handed Ginny a rectangular piece of plastic, explaining how credit cards worked, and told her to use it for any purchases. Minerva had gone with them shortly after their return from Hogwarts this summer to set up a bank account for himself in the Muggle world. It was definitely advantageous to have the option and adaptability to spend money in the Muggle world without first having to go to Gringotts to exchange galleons for pounds. Molly, Luna and Daphne had been a little uncertain, but Hermione promised to help Ginny if she was unsure of anything. Harry had always been the one to handle money, the few times Ginny had been in the Muggle world. Susan wasn't quite as nervous as the others, since she had been out a few times with her aunt, but all the same she was grateful that Hermione was there, just in case. By early evening, they had found the perfect dresses for Hermione, Susan, Luna and Daphne, and paid for them up front, declining the shop's offer to alter the dresses. They weren't a great colour, nor did any of them fit well, but magic was a wonderful thing, and they would handle making sure the dresses were perfect on the day of the ceremony. Alice and Fleur had offered their assistance to Molly, so that the woman didn't have to work on the bridesmaid dresses as well as Ginny's dress all on her own. Harry, Ron, Neville, Blaise and Bill would all be wearing suits that would match the dresses. They would charm the boutonnieres to be the same colour. They had spent the day before picking out clothing, and fortunately their suits didn't require as much altering as the dresses would. With the hardest part of the clothing taken care of, things settled down again. Molly, Alice and Fleur were busy altering the dresses to fit the girls, while Molly also worked to finish Ginny's dress. A few times Molly bemoaned the small ceremony. She wanted a huge event with all their family and friends. But Harry and Ginny put their foot down and insisted. They didn't want a large ceremony with tons of relatives they barely knew. It was just a formality, really. They were already married. Besides, the larger the event, the more chance there was of someone managing to sneak in. They didn't want their wedding to turn into a media circus. Molly understood their thought process. She just wanted to show off her son-in-law to everyone. It had nothing to do with Harry being the boy who lived. She was simply proud of the man he was. He was kind and thoughtful, caring and so good to Ginny. She didn't care about those silly labels the wizarding world placed on his shoulders. To her family, he was simply Harry, one of the most amazing young men she had ever known. In between wedding details, Harry and Ginny had both begun to pack up their belongings in preparation to move to Potter Manor. They wouldn't be spending any time there this summer, but they would send their belongings to the manor for the house elves to set up, so that when they had their midterm break in November, they wouldn't have to deal with all the small details, and the manor would be ready for them. It was slightly surreal for the two teenagers to actually be moving out of their guardians' homes. Even stranger was the idea that McGonagall Castle and the Burrow weren't really their homes anymore. The idea that they were actually adults had hit them hard, as they worked through all of their possessions, packing them into trunks and boxes, leaving bare rooms behind. Harry couldn't help but compare it to the summer before his first year, when Vernon had moved him from his bedroom in the cupboard under the stairs to Dudley's second bedroom. All of his belongings had fit into one box back then. And now? There were boxes and trunks everywhere. He had books and pictures, clothing, all sorts of odds and ends that he had collected over the last few years. McGonagall Castle had been such a wonderful home for him, and while he would be sad to leave it, he was an adult, and it was time for him and Ginny to start living their own lives. They had been technically married for nearly 4 years, and they were ready to start acting like it. Molly had definitely spent much of her time holding back tears as she watched her youngest child slowly packing up her room. How could it be that her little girl was already leaving the nest? Ginny's 17th birthday took place at the end of the week, and they had a large party at the Burrow. Molly cooked up a storm, somehow managing to fit it all in between working on the dresses. Everyone had a great time, enjoying the food and the company. Ginny received many wonderful gifts, including the customary watch most witches and wizards received when they came of age from her parents. Her other presents included Quidditch-related gifts, as well as candy, books, and other trinkets from her friends. Harry gave her a silver necklace with an H and a G intertwined together for a pendant. The rest of the day was interrupted by a surprise guest as they sat down to cut the large cake Molly had baked. It was much like the one she had made for Harry over the last few years, with a live-action Quidditch game on top, and miniature Ginny and Harry zooming around the frosting pitch. Everyone was startled to look up and see Ignotus Pruitt heading down the path to the gardens. Ignatius nodded a greeting and handed a wrapped gift to Ginny.
"Many happy returns,"
he said stiffly. Molly quickly greeted her uncle as Ginny murmured her thanks. Ignatius let a small smile slip through.
I also wish to offer my congratulations on your upcoming wedding. I'm sure you will do the family Pruitt proud as the new Lady Potter.
Reading between the lines, Ginny understood that her mother's uncle was pleased she was marrying into such a high station. She was also grateful that Molly had informed her uncle of the engagement personally, since she knew the stern overseer of the family Pruitt would not appreciate finding out about the union in the Daily Prophet. The day after Lavender had drawn attention to Ginny's engagement ring, a large article had appeared in the newspaper, decrying their upcoming wedding for the Wizarding World to revel in. Harry and Ginny knew that many people would try to gain access to the wedding, which was precisely why they were doing this in another country, with only their group in attendance. No press hexing each other out of the way to get the first picture of the Lord and Lady Potter's first kiss. Just friends and family, celebrating a happy occasion. Ignatius abruptly turned to Molly and Arthur.
I would like to speak with you both, and Ronald, if you have a minute.
It was phrased like a question, but it was clear that he wanted to have this conversation now, so Arthur gestured for his wife and youngest son to follow him into the house. They ended up in the sitting room, Ron incredibly confused, as Ignatius turned to face them.
I have spoken with Charles, and he's loath to return to England permanently. As this is his choice, and William has already turned down my offer, I find myself in quite a bit of a quandary.
Molly frowned. Why is that? She asked, confused. Ignatius sighed slightly, and sat down stiffly. Arthur, Molly, and Ron followed his lead.
I hope you will not take offence when I say that I am disinclined to allow either Frederick or George the opportunity to take the charge of the ancient and noble house of Pruitt. In any event, they do not wish the title either. So it is a moot point. That leaves you.
He looked at Ron. Ron gulped.
Me?
He hoped his voice didn't sound as squeaky as he thought it did. Ignatius nodded regally.
You. I do not wish to continue acting as regent. There is a wizard of proper bloodline who has reached his majority, so it is time for me to pass the title on. I was never the heir. As you are the grandson of my older brother, the title correctly belongs to you.
Ron stared, gobsmacked. He had never even considered this a possibility. He had told the others of the conversation he had overheard last year, but he hadn't thought that he would be the one to put in this position. Did he want to be a lord? A few years ago, he would have taken the offer without hesitation. But he knew more about what it would entail now, and he wasn't sure he wanted it anymore. He had seen the work Harry had to handle concerning the Potter assets. There was a lot more involved in a lordship than just a title and money. After a few minutes of silence, he looked at his parents pleadingly. Understanding, Molly turned back to her uncle. You have already gone to the others. Ignatius nodded.
William has already been named as your heir, Arthur. He informed me that he is happy with that, and does not wish to take on the mantle as head of House Pruitt. Charles was my obvious choice. However, he does not wish to become a head of house, period. He informed me that he is happy where he is. The twins, similarly, are not interested in a lordship. That leaves Ronald. If you decline, the Pruitt line may very well become dormant. We are a patriarchal line, which means even if Ginevra wasn't already marrying into the ancient and noble house, she would not be eligible to take over House Pruitt, and my wife and I have no children of our own.
Ron swallowed harshly. He wasn't sure what to do. After a moment, he bit his lip and forced himself to speak steadily, even though his heart was racing.
How quickly do you need an answer? I would like to consider the offer first, and speak with my girlfriend. I won't make any decisions without her.
Ignatius seemed partly put out, partly impressed.
I will give you until the 1st of September to make your decision. Talk it over with your girlfriend and your family, and let me know what you decide.
They all stood up and Ron nodded.
Thank you,
he said sincerely. Ignatius inclined his head and let Arthur and Molly escort him out, while Ron returned to the garden. Harry and the others were immediately concerned at seeing the shell-shocked expression on Ron's face, but didn't question him there, knowing that he would come to them if he needed to, and suspecting it was something he would want to do in private. Instead, they spent the rest of the evening eating cake, and Ginny showed Ron the present Ignatius had given her, a gold necklace with a pendant forming the Pruitt family crest. Sure enough, the next day Ron asked them all to meet up that afternoon, so that he could tell them what Ignatius had wanted. They were stunned when Ron told them that he might become the new Lord Pruitt. Hermione stared for a few moments, unable to form words. "I thought you said Charlie would be named the heir," she finally managed to get out.
Ron shrugged. Uncle Ignatius says he's already spoken to Bill and Charlie. Bill wants to remain the Weasley heir, and Charlie doesn't want a lordship. Neither do the twins. Even if Uncle Ignatius was willing to pass it on to them, which he really isn't, if I don't take it, the line will go dormant.
His eyes were pleading as he looked at his friends, especially the ones who were poised to take over as a head of house.
What do you think? I mean, I never really considered this. I didn't think I would ever have a title, and I was alright with that. Should I accept?
Blaise and Neville shared a look, before they turned to Harry. He was the only one who actually had taken over as a head of house. Blaise was going to Gringotts with his mother the next month, while Frank's recovery had pushed Neville back and Augusta's plan for him to take over at 21. Not that any of them were complaining. Susan was the first to speak. "I'm not sure if I can help at all," she said hesitantly. "The Bones family is just a noble one, not ancient and noble. And it's different for us. We don't have the choice you do. We were born into this, and it's always been our obligation. You have the ability to decide whether or not you want this." Susan, like Blaise, would be going down to Gringotts soon with her aunt to officially claim her title. Blaise nodded seriously.
Think carefully though, Ron. It's not just a title or a large bank vault. I know the Pruitt family is an ancient and noble house, and is very well off. Ignatius Pruitt has done a good job managing the family fortune. But it's so much more than that. You'll be in charge of the family. You'll effectively be a ruling force over your aunt and uncle and his wife, and to a lesser extent your parents and brothers.
He glanced at Ginny.
Since you're marrying into House Potter, technically you'll be higher than Ron, because the Potter family is above the Pruitt family.
He looked back at Ron.
When your mum married into the Weasley family, she aligned the two houses, making the Weasley family something of a lesser branch to House Pruitt. You will have authority over your father, and later, Bill.
Harry took over, his expression serious.
You'll be managing assets and investments, attending Wizengamot meetings, and a lot of other things. It's a lot of work, for you and your wife.
He glanced at Hermione, and the girl blushed.
We're not trying to sway you, either way. We're just trying to be realistic. There is a lot involved in being a head of house, but beyond that, you will have the opportunity to affect change. You will be able to make people listen. We'll have the chance to work towards a brighter future. You'll have a voice in the government, in the way laws are worded, and even if they're passed. With that comes even more responsibility, but you will be able to ensure that the right laws are being made through the Wizengamot.
Ron nodded in understanding, and turned to Hermione.
Hermione, I know we're not engaged, or married, but whatever I do is going to affect you as well. What do you think?
Hermione gulped, her eyes wide. She loved Ron, and she really didn't care how much money he had, or what his social standing was. But here he was, asking her what she thought about him becoming a lord, and her potentially becoming a lady. She shook her head slightly. It's your decision, Ron. I'll love you no matter what. It'll be a lot for both of us. But if you want this, I will support you. Ron nodded again, and they decided to spend the rest of the afternoon outside. Ron had a lot to think about, and Hermione was right. It was his choice to make. Hogwarts letters were sent out the next morning, and no one was surprised when Ginny opened her letter to see the head girl badge fall out. They congratulated her, as Ginny and Luna spent a few minutes speculating on how strange it would be to be the only two of their group still in school. It was odd to be going back to school after just a few weeks, and both wished they could have had more time to relax, but understood why it couldn't happen. Still, the school year was coming together well. Minerva had been hard at work with the other professors, and she thought they would be ready to go by the wedding. Remus would be returning to his position, but Sirius still didn't want to continue teaching, so Minerva had found someone else to take over. She had even managed to replace Binns with a young woman who had just moved from America after completing a mastery in history. Minerva was hopeful that the new professor would be better than Binns. Not that there was much of a contest there. They were interrupted a moment later when more owls swooped in through the window, dropping letters off for each of the newly graduated students. Hermione shrieked as she picked up her envelope. NEWT results! She gasped, her eyes wide with anxiety. Sirius and Remus entered the dining room a moment later, followed by Minerva. The new headmistress smiled at seeing what the teenagers were holding. I believe the Wizarding Examinations Authority has been working overtime the last few weeks, trying to get out OWL and NET results before the next term. We had to hold off on sending out Hogwarts letters until they were complete, so that the new 6th years would know which classes they would be able to sign up for. Sirius shifted impatiently.
Go on then, open them!
He encouraged them, grinning. Nervously, Harry and his friends opened the letters, reading through their results. Harry felt a knot in his chest loosen as he read. While he hadn't exactly been nervous, it was still a relief to see that he had done well. When they all finished reading their own results, they passed the letters around so that they could see how everyone else had done. NEWT results for Harry Potter. Defense against the Dark Arts, O. Charms, O. Transfiguration, O. Potions, O. Ancient Runes, E. Arithmancy, O. Herbology, E. NEWT results for Hermione Granger. Defense against the Dark Arts, O. Charms, O. Transfiguration, O. Potions, O. Ancient Runes, O. Arithmancy, O. Herbology, O. Muggle Studies, O. NEWT results for Ronald Weasley. Defense against the Dark Arts, E. Charms, E. Transfiguration, E. Potions, A. Herbology, E. NEWT results for Neville Longbottom. Defense against the Dark Arts, O. Charms, E. Transfiguration, E. Potions, E. Arithmancy, E. Herbology, O. NEWT results for Susan Bones. Defense against the Dark Arts, O. Charms, O. Transfiguration, E. Potions, O. Arithmancy, O. NEWT results for Blaise Zabini. Defense against the Dark Arts, O. Charms, E. Transfiguration, O. Potions, O. Ancient Runes, E. Arithmancy, E. Herbology, E. NEWT results for Daphne Greengrass. Defense against the Dark Arts, E. Charms, E. Transfiguration, E. Potions, O. Ancient Runes, E.
arithmancy E, herbology O.
Once everyone had all seen the results, Minerva smiled proudly at her former students.
Well done, all of you. You should be very proud of yourselves.
They all murmured their thanks before filing out of the dining room to get on with their day. The rest of the next week was taken up with the wedding plans. Harry, Ginny, and Sirius worked together to make sure that the black property in Greece would be ready for them, and ensuring the house elves assigned to that property knew how they wanted the grounds set up for the ceremony and reception. Ron spent most of the time deep in thought, even as he helped out with the wedding and meeting with his new coach. A few days before they were set to leave for Greece, he finally had an answer. He sought out his parents that evening to tell them that he was going to accept Ignatius's offer. Both supported him, and the next day they met up with Ignatius at Gringotts to formalize it. Ron would study with his uncle for a year before taking over as head of house. Ron was happy that he wouldn't have to give up his spot with the Arrows. He would still be able to play Quidditch and still perform his duties expected of him. Ignatius would stay on as the proxy for the Pruitt seat on the Wizengamot, as Ron needed to be 25 to take over, just like Harry and Blaise. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. Okay, I am loving this. Ron becoming Lord of House Pruitt. I forgot that happened. I haven't read this one in ages. That's amazing. And can we just say, Molly putting together Lily's old wedding dress for Ginny? Oh my god, that's beautiful. The whole Potters and Redheads thing. Some people might say that's Freudian, but I don't agree. It's just them appreciating the history. And yes, Ginny is like Lily, but she's also very different from how we explained it, and I'm just loving this. I really am. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified for whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.